All right, good morning, boys and girls. Good morning, students. Okay, now this video is about compound sentences, it's about punctuation. Many of you did many mistakes in your written production regarding punctuation, and today it's part one of two that we're going to look on punctuation through what is called compound sentences. Okay, now before we talk about compound sentences, there's a word that I'm going to use quite a lot in the next couple of minutes, and the word is clause. Okay, clause. What is a clause? Okay, a clause is defined as a group of words that contains a subject and a verb. I think that in French they may call this in subordonné. I think that's how it's called. But in English it's called a clause. Okay? So if you take this sentence, for example, I like to play outside. This is a sentence, but it's also called a clause. Why? Because you have a subject, I, and a verb. I like to play, and it's a sentence. Okay, so I like to play outside. In English, there are well, in this class, we're going to focus on two types of clause. Okay, there's one that is called independent clause. If the group of words makes complete sense. Okay, so if you have a normal sentence like this, the car broke down. This is an independent clause. Why? Because you have the subject, the verb, and the rest of the sentence, and it makes sense. Okay, if you write this, then there's no problem. It's grammatically accurate. No, you have what is called dependent clause. The group dependent clause is described as the group of words that does not make sense on its own. You cannot have just this as a sentence. When I was on the highway, if you write this, the idea, this is called a dependent clause because you cannot write this sentence. There's something missing in the sentence. When I was on the highway, it's called a dependent clause because it depends on another idea, whether you put it before or whether you put it after. Okay? There's another type of clause. There's another clause. Well, here, for example, sorry. So if you have this sentence here, the car broke down when I was on the highway. This is called a dependent clause, when I was on the highway, because why? It depends on what is before. The independent clause can be on its own, it makes sense, but you cannot have just a dependent clause like this, okay? Because it doesn't make sense. And there's also Santa Claus, ho ho ho, but this is another story, okay? Now, when we talk about compound sentences, okay, this is how a compound sentence is formed or structured. If you have this sentence, we both love the book, Kim hated the movie, okay? This is called an independent clause. Why? Because this sentence makes perfect sense. We both love the book. Perfect. There's no problem. You have your subject, verb plus the complement. What's left of the sentence. Here, Kim hated the movie. Same thing. Subject, verb, and then what is after what's left of the sentence. Now, most a compound sentence is described or is understood when you put these two independent clauses together. So you have this here and you have this there. If you do this in the text, now if you write this sentence in your written production, I'm going to underline this here. I'm going to write PCT. PCT stands for punctuation. It's a symbol, and it's going to be a mistake. Why? Because when you have two independent clauses like this, and if you add but in between, you need to put a comma there. We both love the book, but Kim hated the movie. Okay? Because you have two independent clauses separated by the word but, you need to put a comma there. If you put a comma, then it's a perfect sentence. It doesn't make sense. It makes sense. It's not a mistake. Okay? Compound sentences. Okay? In a compound sentences, the word but is what we call coordinating conjunctions. I know that it's a very fancy word, but or what is called coordinators. The coordinators are part of a word called fanboys. For, and, nor, but, or, yet, so. Okay? So these words are called coordinators. Okay? For, and, nor, but, or, yet, so. So when you have a word like this in a sentence with two independent clauses, you put the comma. Okay? The comma will be used 95% of the time in a compound sentences. Okay? Now, watch out. Okay? If you have this sentence here, because some of you may have, well, you may wonder, if I have this here, I like apples, bananas, and strawberries. Here, before the end, you don't put a comma. Why? Because it's an enumeration of objects, and this is just a simple rules of grammar rules, no punctuation there. Why? Because this is just one independent clause, just one idea here. However, if I have a sentence like this, I like apples, bananas, and strawberries, and I also enjoy watching movies. Now, this sentence here is an independent clause, and this sentence here is an independent clause. So if you put a coordinators in between, in this case, you need to put a comma, right? Now here I have some examples that we're going to be doing in class. Okay, so I want you to have a look at them and try to write if there's a comma is required or where you put the comma. Okay, all right, don't give up.